In 1994, indie kids and rock fans had their minds blown when Orbital took to the stage at the Glastonbury Festival. The duo's pounding beats and driving bass took dance music out of the underground and into the spotlight. But had it not been for a group of South London lads on holiday in 1987 and a journalist turned DJ running away from a tyrannical government, acid house music may not have existed at all. This series considers how unexpected events and extraordinary people came together to create the musical genres we love. Acid house, Balearic beats and outdoor raves inspired a new breed of British club kids, but they faced a showdown with an outraged establishment, fearful of repetitive beats and chemical highs. So we'll get right on one, matey, with the music makers and party animals to unearth the story behind the banging music that changed a generation.
Hello. I'm well.
The 1980s, a decade synonymous with yuppies, Thatcherism, mobile phones the size of breeze blocks, and of course, going down the disco in your white stilettos. Meanwhile, on the sun-drenched shores of Ibiza in 1987, a birthday party was about to change the way people went for a night on the tiles forever.
The big bang moment for acid house music was in 1987, that summer when Paul Oakenfold and his buddies from South London went over to Ibiza, heard Alfredo, heard that sound and brought that sound back to London, and no one had heard or experienced that sound and that music before. Totally original.
It was 4 guys going on holiday for my birthday and seeing my friends. We got inspired by the music, by the DJs, by the place. We felt this just wonderful moment where it was right time, right place. And what we did do was we didn't leave it there. It became our lives.
Those who were there recall these halcyon days fondly.
Everybody on the dance floor was like, I can feel a rush. I can feel the rush.
But the older generation greeted this new musical sensation with confusion and fear.
I presume they do frenzied dancing, that kind of thing. Probably out of control, not behaving like normally they would, because they're under the effects of the drug.
The spark that ignited this new era in dance music began on the Spanish island of Ibiza. During the 1960s, it started to grow from a sleepy backwater into a mecca for hippies and bohemians. By the early 80s, it was a circus of jet-setters, sun-seekers and young Brits out for a good time.
The island was, and still is, an international playground, right? It's where people go to have a great time. It was mainly where the hippies used to go. From then, it stemmed to opening nightclubs, and these nightclubs were open air. So now, you're going to this nightclub where you're meeting international people from everywhere. You're listening to great music by great DJs. You're in a fantastic location because it's warm, it's an island, and you're looking up at the stars, and it's just sexy as hell. It's just great. And that's, once you get the bug, you keep going back.
Ibiza's cultural melting pot didn't just include dance music. Unexpected acts like Tears for Fears, Grace Jones and Chris Rea were often heard on the dance floor. This musical tombola was a crucial component of the Ibiza sound.
What was so good about Ibiza was the way they played the music. You'd hear rock, indie, you'd hear all different genres of music all put together. So you'd have Norwegians dancing like that, you'd have British dancing like that. And that's what it was. It was the flavour of the mixture of music.
So the surprising combination of the cool, the quirky, and the sometimes downright cheesy bore a strong resemblance to a key musical institution, much closer to home.
Growing up as a child in England, fundamentally, if I think about it, it was Radio 1. And what a great station, you know, Radio 1 is. And I really realised that growing up listening to all kinds of music, first and foremost, is really important, I think, for anyone. You don't have to like all forms of music, but what Radio 1 gave you and gives you is that access to listen to pop, hip-hop, rock, underground music. They have great shows. I think a lot of us, not even consciously being aware of that we listen to all kinds of music. I think that's why we're such a force when it comes to music. And we're so open-minded as a country with our festivals where we have different kinds of lineups. So that's really the landscape in terms of music, which really shaped where I am and what I do.
It wasn't just the happy, happy sound of Radio 1 that expanded the musical horizons of the young Paul Oakenfold. His father had a band which played music like this.
My father was a musician. He played in a skiffle band. I was around music all the time. I played the piano. I loved music. You know, I love music in a really big way. It's just my life, you know.
With riots, strikes and unemployment hitting the headlines in 1980s Britain, the urge to escape to the sun seemed tempting.
I was ready to throw myself into music, 100%.
And down the road in Streatham, a chance meeting with a like-minded party lover started a friendship that would make waves for years to come.
I met Paul on a coach. We was going to do a gig in Slough, and he sat next to me. And, you know, just talking. He'd like to get into the music and stuff, and that's how we met. And I said, "What do you do?" He said, "He's a chef." And I go, I was just trying to work it out. Like, chef, music, mixing, well, maybe. Maybe we could do that. But anyway, we become really good friends.
Trevor Fung was the main DJ at this club called Rumours in Covent Garden. And one night, I believe Trevor was sick. Anyway, stood in. And just absolutely... Look, I was a bedroom DJ. I'd never played to anyone. And to get that opportunity to play music to someone and share my knowledge, my taste, was just incredible. And from then onwards, I had the bug and really wanted to just be a DJ.
A guy that owned a club in London had just bought this club in Ibiza. I went over there in '83, went to work. I stayed over the island, carried on working, went back out there in '87, run a bar. I hired a bar for the whole summer.
It was my birthday, and I wanted to go and celebrate it with my friends.
And he brought over Nicky, Johnny Walker, and Danny Rampling. And we showed them around. That's all we done. We just showed them around. They loved it. They just loved the energy and the excitement. They loved the fact that the different kind of music and, you know, you got to remember they were all sort of soul, playing old rare groove and stuff like that. And it completely changed when they'd heard Frankie Knuckles, Your Love. Mixed in with Nitzer Ebb. It was complete, it was like, whoa. And the DJ at the time was Alfredo, the Amnesia.
Alfredo Fiorito was a journalist. Like many writers, artists and intellectuals, he fled the repressive government regime of his Argentinian homeland. By 1976, he was working in the Balearics as a barman, and in 1987, he was spinning discs as a DJ at the influential Amnesia Club. So when Paul and the lads rocked up on their holiday and heard Alfredo's amazing record collection, well, it led to an explosive meeting of minds.
Amazing. I mean, it was really funny. I mean, I saw Danny Rampling skipping all around the Amnesia, and it's like, whoa. what's going on here? He was like, just skip it. It was hilarious. And, you know, I saw Paul with his head in the bass bins.
The iconic track was an old record by Nelson and Co. called Jibaro, and it was a record from South America that Alfredo had found and played, and it became the theme of the summer. What I know of Alfredo is that he's a great DJ. He has wonderful musical taste. He really inspired me and many people, and he's very influential during that period for so many people. You know, it was without Alfredo there would be a big hole within the history of Balearic beat and music.
It was from then, that summer of '87, going to Amnesia, listening to Alfredo. That's really the start of the acid house scene.
Once it had started, it was unstoppable. It was only fair that the folks back home should get to join the party. Soon enough, the boys were back in Blighty, spreading the word with their very own Ibiza-style club nights. The Ibiza scene had cast its spell over those young DJs. It was only natural that Paul Oakenfold and his friends would bring that party spirit back home. So in the autumn of 1987, a brand new breed of club was born.
The acid house scene in Britain really started at Shoom, and it was run by people who'd been to Ibiza, discovered ecstasy, heard these records, brought them back, and basically wanted to keep their summer holiday going. So they opened their own club in, I think it was a fitness centre in South London, but it became very popular very quickly.
I feel like I'm fading from the lack of love.
Paul Rutherford from Frankie Goes to Hollywood said, "You've got to go to this club, it's amazing, they got all this mad music and lights and crazy." And we were like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Just go and have a look at it, just go and see it, it's great, you'll love it." It had a great feeling, a great bonding of the people. It was brilliant, and the music was great as well.
Danny started Shoom. Paul started Future with my cousin Ian, and I started Rage.
Within a few months, several legendary club nights appeared across the UK. From the Hacienda's Hot in Manchester to Nicky Holloway's The Trip in London. They brought together all walks of life in a party atmosphere.
Ian is key to the whole thing. Me and Ian formed a club, which was Spectrum, and then Future, which was another club, then Loud Noise, which was a third club. We had all these nights going on everywhere. Land of Oz, and we were playing. He was the promoter, I was the DJ, and we were partners, and we were both really inspired in developing and building a scene. The term came about of Balearic beat because we were playing all kinds of music. Playing The Cure next to NWA, next to U2, next to a house record, for me was what you hear on radio. So it made sense. And I think that was a big moment why the scene really exploded.
The DJ's playlist mixed old and new tracks to blistering effect. They complemented their Balearic beats with another sound that had travelled to the UK, Chicago house music.
Electronic music became house music. Where does house music come from? It comes from the Warehouse Club in Chicago. When people asked the local record shop, "Can you give me some of that music they play in the house?"
As word spread that a musical revolution was happening, the appeal of the clubs began to gain momentum.
The people who turned up initially were what we called workers who had gone to Ibiza for the summer and experienced what was going on. And they, like myself, were all the same, didn't want it to stop. So I was lucky that I was doing a Friday night where I was the DJ, so I could come back, get all the records and play it at this small little club in Streatham in South London. And then when everyone came back at the end of the season, then Ian was like, well, why don't we do a big club in the West End of London? There's a family of all the workers who went to Ibiza who are now back in England looking for something to do. And that family of workers just didn't live in London. They lived in Brighton, Sheffield and Manchester. And they would come down and be blown away by the experience because it was so different, fresh, new. It was a real moment where you could express yourself, and that was key to it.
It was really a nationwide thing. The great thing about it was, like, barriers were brought down. It didn't really matter where a record came from, who made it, as long as it sounded right and suited the moment, suited the drugs you were taking and had the right tempo.
Out of this mix of influences, a new and unique sound began to emerge. Something strange, hypnotic, and definitely squelchy. Something that came to be known as acid house.
It really felt like a musical revolution. Acid Tracks by Future. The first time I heard that, there was no tune. It was very dark. It just had this weird squelchy noise going all the way through, which eventually I read about and found out it was the Roland bass line. And it just sounded like nothing I'd ever heard in my life, and that in itself was really exciting. It was an absolutely brand new kind of music.
And everyone was really happy, you know. And I think before that, the scene that was sort of going on was all hip-hop, and it was, like, mean and a bit, you know, moody. And it was a real antidote to that.
The party wasn't just happening in London. DJ Mike Pickering had caught the Balearic wave and brought acid house to Manchester.
Looking at the Hacienda and the time when we were there, you could almost pinpoint it to a fortnight when it went from being somewhere where a handful of people who were in the know were going to suddenly everybody was going, because it was the sort of whirlpool that was drawing people in. Because again, it was one of these points where you've got people that love this music, but the music doesn't have a platform. So you've got pirate radio, you've got some illegal raves just starting off. But in terms of actually an official place where you could go and get completely off your skull and dance yourself stupid, there weren't that many places. So the Hacienda was a really early example of somewhere that provided a locus for this, you know, this desire that was there. So again, John Peel was at the forefront. You were hearing acid house tracks on, you know, like Pierre or Future, Adonis. These were sort of being played on the radio. And they sounded really incongruous. To my ear, it took me a while to really get acid house, even though I loved dub and so on, which is a similarly stripped back, quite minimal form of dance music. It took me quite a while to get my ear in with acid house. So I kept thinking, where's the rest of it gone?
The music was quite repetitive, quite trance-like, so I think that in turn lended itself to that drug. So I think they sort of went hand in glove with that particular sound, and that's why people weren't getting off on ecstasy, probably with country music or heavy metal.
People would just be like that. It was just, you know, I mean, you had to be there to see it. It was, when you see 5,000 people with their hands up in the air with lasers going through them, it was amazing to be a disc jockey at that time. It was amazing. I mean, me being a disc jockey now and even before, there's never been another time like it. It was amazing. It was like, wow. And it just started to escalate and escalate.
The euphoria inspired by acid house eventually spread across the UK. The dance music explosion of 1988 gained a name that summed up its blissed-out nature. It was time for the second summer of love. Demand for new music hit fever pitch in 1988 and 1989, and the pop charts filled with mind-boggling sounds. They competed with the likes of Bros, Sunita and Cliff Richard for the attention of listeners. French Kiss by Lil Louis reached number 2 in the charts in July 1989. It proved confusing to pop fans and record company executives who hadn't noticed the revolution taking place on the dance floors of Britain.
It slowed down and it had some breathing on it. And everybody on the dance floor was like, I can feel a rush. I can feel the rush. And then it would come back again. And all it was, a little sequence. And of course the record companies were going, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. There's no artist.
The clubbing explosion of 87 and 88 had inspired budding musicians to experiment with sounds that had never been heard before, as equipment became cheaper and more readily available. The late 80s and the early 90s saw a boom in do-it-yourself music production, with records being made for next to nothing.
I think there was a lot of synergies with punk, actually, with Acid House. A lot of very similar, that whole DIY ethic, which I think was brilliant. People making fantastic records in their bedrooms, putting them on white label, printing them up, pressing them up, and going around the shops and selling them directly to the shops, which is what happened with punk rock, isn't it? All these tiny little labels springing up, and people were, you know, artists, bands were selling directly to the shops and getting help from distributors like Rough Trade, actually going straight to the punters. And I think Acid House is very similar. So many of my friends were making records in their bedrooms and starting small labels.
Graham Massey from 808 State had originally been in a group called Danny and the Dressmakers, who made their own albums as cassette-only things in the late 70s, early 80s. It was very post-punk, and used the same kind of attitude, I suppose, when 808 State were going. The music was really varied. It did sound pretty homemade, but they had massive hits with it.
Well, before it was Acid House, it was just sort of British dance music, really, and we were making it in squats and bedrooms with the very early samplers, S900s, Akai's, Ensoniq, Mirage, and Atari, early Atari computers, and the early 303s. And initially, we were mixing up indie music with New York beats, electro beats and hip-hop beats. And very quickly we started mixing up and trying to emulate Chicago acid tracks with the 303s and how they came out. And there were very few labels doing it, but I happened to live with Alex Patterson from became the Orb, and above us lived Andrew Weatherall, who was big DJ at Boyzone and Shum. We became friends, and we very quickly worked out what sort of records he liked, we were doing, and he started championing our records. Other people were championing them and started playing. And then very quickly we started DJing and doing parties, as did Jimmy and Bill from the KLF, and we all kind of, and we were doing parties and putting on, you know, sort of fairly dubiously legal experiences out of the country and stuff like that. And, you know, really tapping into it.
Inspired by the euphoric vibe, partygoers found new ways to channel their talents. They could put their own stamp on music, and with the aid of affordable technology, the sky was the limit.
The technology really developed in the mid-80s beyond the reaches of just the sort of super rich. Basically, everybody gathered all these cheap instruments together and started using them, abusing them in a way that they weren't intended, you know. And that's how, I guess, things are born out of necessity. You know, you sort of have what you've got and it just becomes something. without really trying. You just sort of, you know, I found I was trying to copy people, trying to copy Detroit techno and getting it wrong. And then people would say, well, that's different. You go, well, it's just a failed attempt at doing something from Detroit. And they go, no, it's good, I like it. And you go, oh, OK.
Yeah, I think the good ingredients for a great acid house record are slamming beats, using those Roland drum machines. Certainly the 808, a great kick drum off the 909, some nice 808 program drum beats. Lovely acid house 303 bass line. And a little hook, be that a musical hook or maybe just a little vocal snatch. I think definitely a hook was really good. It's always important when you're on the dance floor. That's the thing that would lodge into your brain. You'd see people that week, the next weekend, going into record shops and saying, you know, the one that goes to...
808, 909, 303. No, not telephone dialing codes. They're gadgets made by the Roland Synth Company. Key ingredients in the acid house sound. The Roland TB303 had been on the market for just 18 months in the early 80s, but it was a commercial failure, rejected by mainstream shoppers. Once it found its way into the bargain bin, this unwanted tech was salvaged by creative artists in the acid house underground.
I remember my brother he went to collect our first 303, and he went to get it from a guy who was a sort of northern kind of club singer. And he was really proud of something. And he made my brother sit and listen to the entire bass line of West End Girls by the Pet Shop Boys. He said, oh, listen to this, lad. He programmed it all in and just sat there sort of nodding. My brother just sort of, great, you know. And that's it. You know, that's kind of what it was intended for. And it was just abused because nobody ever, you know, uses it in song mode or makes songs out of it. You just get one bar and loop it like some kind of lunatic rhythmic pattern, and you know, you team that up with an analog drum machine, and it just kicks in a way that wasn't really heard before. You know, it didn't sound like real drums or real bass, which is what we were mostly used to then.
But it wasn't just bargain bass. Drum machines were also available at rock-bottom prices.
I went to Soho Soundhouse and bought a 909 drum machine, which is one of the most sought-after drum machines now. They've gone up in price. The 909 and the 808 are two of the most sought-after drum machines. And I bought one for £230 because they were just trying to get rid of them because these 707s had come out and nobody wanted these analog, old-fashioned drum machines. The 808's got a beautiful roundness to it, but the 909's got this tribal thud. It's kind of thick and heavy, but it's really clear and clacky, and you hear it, and it's just kind of, it's kind of muddy and woody at the same time, and it just feels good.
By the 90s, tracks could find their way into the clubs and the charts by word of mouth. Costly PR campaigns were unnecessary.
Me and Pete Wiggs made a record called 7 Ways to Love. St Etienne were going at that point, but we thought if we released it as a St Etienne record, it's too much of a novelty dance record, and it will just probably... you really, really couldn't do that now. I mean, you could have done it in the late 70s, but even then, the wheels would have turned much slower, I think.
It cost less than a fiver for Orbital to make their hit Chime. Paul Hartnell had enough dough left to get around in.
I was trying to test a theory I had that I thought I don't have to use the 4-track to record on 4 tracks. I've got 6 inputs, so I could just bounce it straight to do a live take straight onto my dad's tape deck. So I just literally knocked something up before going to the pub one summer's evening. And just kind of when I filled the sequencer up with ideas and you know, all the analog synths, everything was doing something, the drum machines were full, it's like, OK, I'll just record it then. And just did that jam that, you know, became Chime and, you know, gave me a career in music. You know, it was just sort of knocking something up to see how it would work, and it was a kind of acid house, Detroit techno kind of, with a sort of almost like a sort of reggae dancehall beat to it, which actually, you know, sounds quite interesting, but I wasn't really thinking about it at the time. And from that jam being heard by Jazzy M in his sort of Vinyl Zone Fulham record shop, he just went mad for it.
DJ Jazzy M of pirate radio station London Wicked Radio proved to be instrumental in Orbital's success.
He was quite a big mentor to me. He used to give me loads of free records because I didn't have much money. And he was teaching me how to make house music as well. He'd say, no, you want to do something like this, and he'd give me sort of KLF records and things like that. He was very big on sort of British dance music and pushing that kind of vibe. And I gave him the demo for Chime, and he said, oh, I can't play it now, it's Friday afternoon. I've got, you know, they're like 3 deep DJs doing that thing that they all do in, I don't know if they still do it, I don't even know if DJ shops exist, but it was like a sort of, like a bidding system where they'd play a record in the shop loud, and then people would sort of put their hand up and they'd put it on their pile on the counter, and that's how the DJs built up their little piles, and then when they'd got enough records, they'd pay for it and go out. And I remember he played Chime on his headphones and listened to it. He was just really smiling at me and took his headphones off and said, hang on, and put it on the PA really loud. And then all the people, every one of them, put their hand up for one of those, and it's like...
Now that musicians had the means to make their ideas a reality, clubbers were thirsty for more. But what goes up must come down. Acid house spilled out of the bedrooms and clubs, turning into open-air raves. But trouble was just around the corner. By the close of the 1980s, an explosion of thrilling new clubs, exciting new music, and a surge in self-expression had created a new era in music for British kids. And total confusion for their parents.
Do you think it's anything to do with a certain religion, do you think?
No,
is it anything
is it?
like that?
No, it's more to do with a kind of a drug, isn't it? It's a drug.
Yeah, well, those that take it ought to be ashamed of themselves.
In this brave new world, the DJ was king. With a bit of skullduggery, a rave could happen just about anywhere.
Suddenly, the DJ becomes the star, and all you need is a DJ, decks, amplifier, and a generator. So you hire a field from a farmer, give him whatever it was, amount of money, and then you could be there all night and just have a bottle of water. The DJs would be making that music themselves, cutting 12-inch vinyl, playing this, only a few copies, maybe only one, white labels. They would play that at this event. It's the only place you could ever hear it. I mean, unique event, how exciting.
Exciting or not, to hold raves in fields and disused warehouses was seen as a declaration of war on the establishment. Party organisers pitted their wits against the police throughout the early 90s.
The idea would be to get the rave in progress, get things up and running, and once things were up and running, invariably no one wanted to break it up, whether it was legal or illegal, because obviously if you've got 5,000 people dancing crazy to a party, it could be quite an explosive situation. You try and shut that down. So it was always the idea was to get it up and going as quick as possible. But all means, quite a common one a lot of people used to do was pretend it was a promo for a video. So you get people invariably walking about with a clipboard, and when the authorities arrive, police people would say, oh yeah, no, we're just shooting the new Alison Moyet, the new video for the Cars or whoever. So they think, oh, that's because all these people would obviously be dressed quite trendy, young people, but they think, oh, there's just a pop promo going on.
Chief among the outdoor party organisers was a financially astute young man called Tony Colston Hayter. He spotted an opportunity to capitalise on this huge demand for acid house parties and set up an organisation to supply the growing demand. In 1988, his first sunrise party was stopped by the police. Their game of cat and mouse continued throughout the late 80s and into the early 90s.
20,000, 30,000 people were turning up in the field. So, of course, the system, the police, didn't realise, didn't understand, didn't know what was going on, and was scared of it in some respects. And understandably, if you've got suddenly 20,000 people turn up in a field in the middle of the night, you're like, what the hell's going on?
There were 10,000 people going to a field at midnight, paying 20 quid to hear some music.
Baffled by this behaviour, the press and the public had plenty of ideas about what people were getting up to in fields in the middle of the night.
I presume they do frenzied dancing, that kind of thing. Probably out of control, not behaving like normally they would, because they're under the effects of the drug.
I've just read about it in the newspapers that acid house music, I assumed it was something to do with the drug scene.
It must affect the brain in some way.
Unless it's just the music that does it. Who
All them
knows?
lights flashing don't do you any good either, do it? Oh, I wouldn't even go in the pub where them lights are.
Oh,
because
no,
they drive
no.
you mad, don't they?
Acid house became synonymous with drugs, and so the establishment reacted. The BBC, once happy to play songs like We Call It Acid, now banned from their playlist any song with acid in the title. Not only did cuddly old Top of the Pops put the lid on Acid House, but also the press pitched in. They whipped up a storm to terrify parents and make them question what their offspring were up to at night.
My favourite house track is Where's Your Child by Bam Bam, and it's not exactly what you would call a good time tune.
Where's your child?
It's a great dance tune, but also it's a sort of message to the parents of the people on the dance floor saying, do you know where your child is? Do you know how much MDMA they've ingested? Do you know how sweaty and out of their heads they are on that dance floor? You know, just watch out, because this is a big change. This is a cultural shift. So I think it's interesting in that respect, and it's saying this isn't just good time music. This is a big shift. You don't know what's happening to your kids. And also to the kids themselves, it's sort of saying, where are you at?
While parents fretted, the authorities struggled to outwit canny ravers, determined to have a good time.
There was a crux point, when it was like, OK, people were worried about acid house, or it's all drug-related and all that kind of thing.
The inability to control partygoers led the government to shut down the raves with legislation.
There was so much pressure. I think a lot of it did come from the breweries, actually, because they were losing so much money through young people no longer drinking alcohol and just drinking water in bottles and going raised in fields, that this brought about a government bill to try and stop people gathering together with, you know, loud music and stuff, which was the Criminal Justice Bill of 1994.
This bill gave police officers the power to remove people from events where music was characterised by the sound of repetitive beats.
People going out and partying and taking drugs have been going on for a long time, and the tabloids were always there to whip up a scandal. And, you know, once, obviously, there were any fatalities involved, then the tabloids could go in very heavy and cause the rest of the population to be seriously worried about how dangerous this kind of thing was.
With raves being scuppered, it looked like the party was over. Yet the spirit remained and grew stronger, drawing like-minded people together. The music and parties didn't just survive, they evolved and multiplied. By the mid-1990s, glamorous new clubs like Cream and Ministry of Sound were drawing in the crowds. Ibiza continued to thrive too. Amnesia, the birthplace of Acid House, remained a top party destination. Clubs like Space and Privilege drawing young holidaymakers in their thousands. With the popularity booming for acts like The Prodigy and the Chemical Brothers, the party sound thrived and went worldwide. It's now known as electronic dance music.
All those people who were running clubs in the 90s and Ibiza then have all moved to America and are now doing very, very well with EDM. You know, went right round the world, the whole rave culture, apart from there. And it's finally blossomed in America all these years later, which I think is quite interesting. I don't think you can ever kill off the rave spirit. I think it continues to this day. And, you know, people want to party.
The aftershocks from Paul Oakenfold's first encounter with Alfredo in 1987 are still being felt. One small moment in time went on to have an impact that went way beyond just music.
It was a big change that I don't think has ever really been fully recognised. It had its own fashion. It had literature like Trainspotting by Irving Welsh, you know. And, it affected all of the arts. It affected graphics. It affected film. It affected every area of popular culture. So to me, it's just as important a movement as punk. But you know, people don't seem to recognise it.
The thing about dance music is people will always dance. Dance music is never going to go away until people stop dancing, and that's not going to happen. And generally speaking, there's a few sort of fundamental laws about it that I've noticed. No matter what I do with music, if I'm playing live and I drop a 909, just going, oof, 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 the whole place comes alive, and it just happens, and it's every time, and it's happened for the last 25 or so years for me. That will always pick up the crowd, and it's just like almost like a fundamental truth to dance music, and that simplicity, that tribalisticness.
A seismic shift in music, a new freedom of expression, the emergence of 24-hour party culture. You could say that it was all down to those lads going on that one sunny summer holiday.
I'm not responsible for anything. Basically, that's what happened, yeah, but I'm not responsible, no. But that's what happened. Just work it out. No, I'm not responsible. No, it's not my fault. Definitely not my fault. It's Paul's fault. Ask him.
It was just, you have this love and passion for something, and we were doing it. We were broke. We had no money. We were just, we had something that we felt was special, and we were sharing it with people, and people were feeling the same as what we were feeling, and then it just exploded with British culture, British music. I mean, the whole thing shifted.